issue. He is the expert's expert on this topic. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Professor Israeli right now. Professor Israeli was born in Fez, Morocco. Professor Israeli is currently teaching Islamic, Chinese, and Middle Eastern history at the Hebrew University. He is a graduate of the Hebrew University in history and Arabic literature and holds a PhD in Chinese and Islamic history from the University of California, Berkeley. Since 1974, he has been a lecturer and a professor of Islamic and Chinese history at Hebrew University. During his illustrious academic career, Professor Israeli spent his sabbaticals at York University in Toronto, the University of Pittsburgh, Harvard University, Boston University, Australian National University in Canberra, Melbourne University, and Naruto University in Japan. Professor Israeli is the author of 35 books, some of them, by the way, on my bookshelves, and some 100 scholarly articles in the fields of Islamic radicalism, Islamic terrorism, the modern Middle East, Islam in China and Asia, and the opening of China by the French.
To say, when he appeared in instances like this, he used to say, I will have a few words before I say something. The few words I want to say, just that I'm puzzled by the fact that the minister who appeared here before us was the Minister of Public Diplomacy, it's called in diaspora, while we have in the Israeli government the Deputy Prime Minister, Silvan Shalom, who is Minister for the Negev and the Galilee. And I don't know why he should not be the first concerned with this issue. And I think if you did not think about it before, it's time that you should, because I think due to the fact that he is Deputy Prime Minister, he could perhaps influence your noble pursuit even more than Yuli is doing. That's just a suggestion. You know, we have to realize that when we speak about the question of the Bedouins in the Negev, this is only a small part of a much larger issue, and therefore I would like to put what Seth has said before me with so much talent of oratory, that the question of the Bedouins is only a small part, and perhaps even not the most important part of the question of the Arabs in Israel, what we call by mistake Israeli Arabs. And I'll explain in a while why by mistake. And who consider themselves Palestinians for all intents and purposes, and they proclaim their identity very openly about being Palestinians, although they are Israelis as we recognize them. They hold Israeli passport, they have Israeli citizenship, and so on. And therefore, I think the context where we place the identity of those Bedouins is of very major importance in the context that we are trying to deal with here. And I would like also, for fairness, to draw the attention to the fact that we are talking about Palestinian Arabs, the Bedouins are part of that, and we are two Jews talking about Arabs, and which of course may signify that you have a certain point of view or a certain bias, because there is anything, hardly anything, that we can agree upon when you look at it from two different points of view, Arabs on the one hand, or Palestinians, and Jews on the other. And therefore, I should take that into consideration. You know, about not agreeing, I am reminded of a Muslim. The Bedouins are Muslims. So they are Muslim by religion, and the Arab or Palestinian by nationality. And of course, Jews are Jews by nationality and also by religion. And therefore, the points of view that you get from both sides are bound to be quite different from each other. So that's what reminds me, is that there was some kind of debate between a Muslim imam, a Jewish rabbi, and a Christian priest about the question, the very, very important question, when does life start? And it was sort of connected with the question of abortion and so on. And the Christians were the most insistent upon the fact that life starts with conception. And therefore, from that point, you cannot do anything to interfere. The Muslims were a little bit more forgiving, more liberal, and the Imam said, well, in Islam, life starts only after the 7th or 8th week of pregnancy. And before that, it's not considered a human being. And the rabbi said, my friends, in Judaism, it's completely different. Life starts after the children grow up and leave the house. So you see, on those very important issues, views are very different. Now, here, back to the question of the Bedouins as part of the Palestinian issue in Israel, I have to suggest to you the following. Please try to conceive of them, of that group of Bedouins, not only in terms of Arab or Palestinian or Israelis, because all of us have different foci of identity. All of us in our private life, we are fathers, but we are also sons, and we are brothers or sisters and cousins and friends and so on. And in each one of those identities, we belong to a different circle of people, acquaintances who surround us. So here also, you can be not only a Palestinian, or not only a Bedouin, but also a Palestinian, a Muslim, an Israeli, an Arab, and all those are very relevant to the brief discussion that I'm going to offer here. And therefore, because of that multitude of identities, which is not unique to Israeli Arabs, I suggest to you to conceive of their identity in terms of four concentric circles. In the centermost is the Israeli identity, because after all, they are Israelis. And because they are Israelis, they also make certain claims towards Israeli society, towards the state of Israel. And as Israelis, which they certainly are, because they hold Israeli passport, Israeli identity cards, they are born in Israel, they are raised in Israel, they pay or avoid taxes like other Israelis and so on. Now, as Israelis, and you have to appreciate that, when the State of Israel was established back in 1948, there were about 130 or 50,000 Arabs in general, including Bedouins. Maybe a third of them were Bedouins, upon the establishment of the State of Israel. And they continue to grow and to prosper, and they advance in all kinds of ways. However, the State of Israel was mistaken from the very beginning by letting them cultivate their own separate identity. And that was expressed in the most acute ways in terms of education. Because Israel, wishing to be liberal towards the Arabs, told them, okay, the official language is Hebrew, but Arabic will also be considered as one of the two official languages of the country. Let's say like French in Canada, despite the fact that the majority is English speakers. Upon not only that, but the state also agreed that the Arabs should maintain their separate system of education in Arabic, paid for by the state, but the state, despite the fact that it elaborates certain curricula which are supervised by the Ministry of Education, the state cannot be present in every class. And the state cannot make sure that what is taught in the classes is necessarily, let's say, loyal to the State of Israel. And I think that was one of the major mistakes made by the State of Israel since then, and that error is being maintained to these days. And of course, the direct result of that if you educate two sets of citizens in the same country by two different sets of languages, you of course teach them two separate sets of values upon which they grow up. No wonder then that when they grow up, while for the State of Israel, the Day of Independence is the most important day in our calendar, in the secular calendar, of course. For the Arabs, this is the Nakba. That's the day of disaster when they lost their country and so on and so forth. And liberalism of the Israeli education went so far that certain periods when Meretz was part of the coalition, they even introduced some of the Palestinian most virulent anti-Israelis among the Palestinian poets. They introduced them as part of the curriculum in the country. Now, if you teach those poets who are virulently anti-Israel, then of course you raise doubts in the minds of the Israeli kids about their conviction with regard to their state, to the establishment of a Jewish state after so many years diaspora and so on and so forth. In other words, these separate systems of education have created, on the one hand, a separate identity of the Arab kids, including the Bedouins, and on the other hand, it raised doubts in the mind of the Jewish kids about their entitlement to the land where they are living. And therefore, a certain amount of forgiveness towards manifestations of a separate identity were accepted little by little by Israeli society as those values that were cultivated by the Arabs eroded the Jewish general self-confidence that had obtained in the country, let's say, before 1967. So that is the centermost circle of identity, which I call the Israeli one. The second circle around it is the Palestinian one. Of course, in Israeli statistics for many years, and Seth referred to that. In Israeli statistics, Bedouins were considered apart from the Palestinians. Yeah, there are so many Arabs in Israel and Bedouins, but Bedouins are both Arabs and Palestinian. We didn't want to count them in the same number in order not to threaten ourselves with this growing demographic issue of the Arabs in Israel. But as the Palestinian identity grew among the Arabs in Israel, especially after the 1967 war, when the borders were opened and connection between the families was allowed, which was disconnected previously until the war, then of course the identity of the Israeli Arabs, so-called, who were until then completely separated and isolated from their brethren, also started to grow.